Quantum computing has become crypto's latest bogeyman. The fear is that once it becomes powerful enough, it could crack Bitcoin's encryption, along with that of many other cryptocurrencies, and allow attackers to steal funds. The problem is that the discussion around this topic is completely chaotic. Every time there's a headline about progress in quantum computing, panic spreads, and timelines quickly fill up with doomsday predictions. Today, we're looking at a recent report that cuts through the hype, clarifies the real risks, and separates what actually deserves attention from what is simply FUD. My name is Guy, and if you're concerned about crypto's long-term future, this is a video you should not skip. Before we begin, one thing needs to be made clear. I am not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video should be taken as financial advice. This is purely educational content designed to explain quantum computing and its potential impact on the crypto space. If that sounds good, hit the like button and let's dive in. So, without further delay, where do we really stand on quantum computing? To answer that, we're drawing from a report by A16Z Crypto titled Quantum Computing and Blockchains: Matching Urgency to Actual Threats, written by Justin Thaler. We'll focus only on the most important takeaways here, but the full report is linked in the description if you want to explore it further. As the title suggests, the report argues that most quantum timelines are heavily exaggerated. It stresses that there's no need for immediate panic and warns that rushing into post-quantum upgrades could actually create new problems. So, what would it actually take for quantum computing to pose a real threat to crypto? The report introduces a key concept: a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, or CRQC. This refers to a fault-tolerant, error-corrected machine capable of running algorithms at a scale large enough to threaten cryptographic keys, including those securing the Bitcoin network today. To briefly touch on the technical side, headlines about quantum progress often mention qubits. A qubit is the basic unit of information in a quantum computer, but most reported numbers refer to physical qubits, which are noisy and highly error-prone. To break cryptography, you need logical qubits, which are stable, reliable units built from many physical qubits using error correction, extremely low error rates, and long enough runtimes to complete complex calculations. That's as technical as we'll go here. The report also highlights how marketing further distorts the picture. Many quantum demonstrations are designed for publicity and don't translate into real cryptographic capability. When you hear about machines with thousands of qubits, they're often specialized systems useful for certain optimization tasks, not the general-purpose machines required to attack crypto at scale. Even the most ambitious public roadmaps are focused on improving reliability, not breaking encryption. IBM's roadmap, for example, discusses hundreds of reliable qubits, which is impressive engineering, but still nowhere near the thousands needed, operating accurately for long durations to perform real cryptanalysis. So what's the final verdict on timing? The report argues that fears of Bitcoin's core cryptography being practically broken within the next 5 years are not supported by publicly available information. Even a 10-year timeline is considered aggressive. The key takeaway is that while progress is real and exciting, there is still a long runway, likely a decade or more before quantum computing becomes a practical threat. The next time you see headlines predicting a quantum apocalypse in just a few years, treat them with skepticism for what they are: click-driven hype. Finally, after offering some reassurance on timelines, the report draws an important distinction between encryption and signatures. Encryption is about keeping information secret. Signatures are about proving authenticity, specifically proving that you're the legitimate owner authorized to move funds. This distinction matters because when crypto holders confuse signatures with encryption, they often end up worrying about the wrong threat. So, how does this play out in practice? The report explains a concept known as HNDL, or Harvest Now, Decrypt Later attacks. In simple terms, this means an attacker can capture encrypted data today, store it, and wait. If a sufficiently powerful quantum computer becomes available in the future, they can then attempt to decrypt data that was collected years earlier. According to the report, this kind of data harvesting is very likely already happening, That's why any information that needs to remain sensitive for 10, 20, or even 50 years can't be treated as a future problem. This applies to government communications, medical records, legal documents, corporate data, and even long-term identity information. This is also why governments are actively preparing for this scenario right now. However, the report makes it clear that digital signatures don't behave the same way. There's no hidden message inside a signature that a future machine can suddenly unlock. The risk is not retroactive. It's forward-looking. If a cryptographically relevant quantum computer eventually exists, it could allow attackers to forge signatures or derive private keys from public keys from that point onward. But signatures created before that moment don't suddenly become invalid or suspicious. In short, Harvest Now Decrypt Later is mainly an encryption problem, not a signature problem. That's why the world's largest internet players are prioritizing post-quantum encryption today. Chrome has already rolled out a hybrid approach for secure web connections, combining traditional methods with post-quantum techniques to protect against future attacks. Cloudflare has implemented similar hybrid systems across large portions of real-world internet traffic, including browsing, logins, and API calls. The goal is to reduce the amount of encrypted data today that could later become readable archives. Building on this, the report also examines where zero-knowledge, or ZK, proofs fit into the picture. For those unfamiliar, a zero-knowledge proof is designed to prove something without revealing the underlying secret. The report argues that ZK systems, such as ZK snarks, are in a stronger position than many people assume. Even if they rely on today's cryptography, their privacy guarantees still hold. The proof itself does not expose the secret data, even to a future quantum attacker. As a result, there's nothing meaningful to harvest now and decrypt later, unlike encrypted messages. Proofs created before the arrival of a truly powerful quantum computer should remain valid for what they proved at the time. That said, the risk appears after such machines exist, as attackers could potentially forge proofs that look valid while making false claims. After addressing Harvest Now Decrypt Later and clarifying the difference between encryption and signatures, the report turns to what this all means for blockchains. The reassuring takeaway is that most blockchains are not vulnerable to HNDL attacks. When people say quantum computers will decrypt Bitcoin, it sounds alarming, but it's usually the wrong way to frame the issue. On most blockchains, the ledger is already public and readable today. Quantum computing doesn't unlock hidden on-chain secrets. It changes what attackers might be capable of doing in the future. That said, the report does highlight an important exception: privacy-focused technologies that rely on encryption to keep transaction details hidden. If encrypted transaction data is stored on-chain, it can be copied today and potentially decrypted later. This means protocols promising permanent transaction privacy need to stay especially alert to developments in quantum computing. Beyond the caution raised around privacy-focused technology, the overall message is fairly reassuring. Crypto is not facing an existential threat from Harvest Now Decrypt Later attacks in the future. That doesn't mean there's nothing to think about, but quantum computing is far from a guaranteed force that will unravel blockchains and wipe out the entire industry. Put simply, cryptocurrencies still have a future, even in a world where quantum computing becomes a reality. And speaking of that future, if you want to position yourself to benefit from it, you might want to check out the Coin Bureau Deals page. There you'll find sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000, trading fee discounts of up to 50%, and deposit cashback offers of up to 75% across some of the top crypto exchanges. Accessing these deals is simple. Just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Once you're on the page, choose the deal that fits you best and hit one of the Sign Up Now buttons. These offers won't last forever, so take advantage of them while they're still available using the link below or the QR code shown here. Bitcoin's quantum headaches. Up to this point, A16Z's report might give the impression that there's little to worry about. However, it then turns to a set of challenges that Bitcoin, in particular, will face in a quantum-enabled future. So, what exactly are Bitcoin's problem areas? One major issue is governance, specifically the speed of governance. Any meaningful upgrade to the Bitcoin network requires coordination across wallets, exchanges, miners, and node operators. A post-quantum transition wouldn't happen automatically. Users would need to actively move their funds to new, quantum-safe addresses, and no one can do that on their behalf. So who is most exposed? Coins whose public keys are already visible on-chain. This includes some early transaction formats, users who reuse addresses, and certain newer output types, where the public key is embedded in the locking script from the start. There's also the so-called race condition during transactions. When a Bitcoin transaction is broadcast, the public key is revealed and then sits in the mempool waiting for confirmation. In a world with a powerful quantum computer, an attacker could attempt to derive the private key in that window and broadcast a competing transaction. Early on, such attacks would likely be expensive and focused on high-value targets such as large holders. Another governance challenge involves abandoned coins. A significant amount of Bitcoin hasn't moved in years because keys were lost, owners passed away, or wallets were simply forgotten. If Bitcoin migrates to a new signature scheme, what happens to those coins? Are they frozen permanently, claimed by whoever gains quantum capabilities, or effectively destroyed? Each option carries serious trade-offs, and even if consensus is reached, the migration itself would be slow by design. Bitcoin blocks have limited space, and migration transactions would compete with normal network usage. This creates long timelines and the risk of fee spikes during periods of congestion. As a result, any transition would need to be cautious, but also as efficient as possible. The report's final point on Bitcoin focuses on separating signature risk from mining risk. Quantum threats target Bitcoin's digital signatures, not the proof-of-work mechanism that secures the network economically. Mining relies on hashing, where quantum computers offer only a limited theoretical advantage. In practice, the costs and complexity involved make significant mining speedups unlikely. And even if large miners did gain some quantum edge, it would mostly affect who wins blocks, rather than undermining Bitcoin's overall security model. So while Bitcoin will face difficult decisions and technical changes, headlines claiming quantum computing is about to destroy Bitcoin are massively oversimplifying the reality. At the center of crypto's shift toward a quantum-resistant future are what's known as post-quantum signatures. On the surface, this all sounds like a simple upgrade. Swap out one signing method for another, roll it out, and move on. In reality, it's nowhere near that straightforward, especially in crypto. So what are the real problems here? As a quick heads up, the report goes very deep into technical detail at this point. Rather than turning this into a computer science lecture, it's more useful to focus on the practical takeaways. One of the report's strongest warnings is that moving too fast with too much confidence can end up breaking critical systems. Signatures are everywhere in crypto. Every transaction, every validator message, every multi-sig approval. Changing them affects fees, node requirements, and the core rules the entire network depends on. In short, this is an area where moving slowly really matters. Beyond that overarching theme, one major cost is size. Most post-quantum signatures and keys are significantly larger than what blockchains use today. Larger signatures mean larger transactions. Larger transactions mean higher fees, increased bandwidth usage, more storage requirements, slower syncing, and potentially more strain on smaller nodes. For exchanges and node operators, this can translate into higher hardware and bandwidth costs, increasing the risk of pushing networks toward larger, more centralized infrastructure. The second major cost is risk. These cryptographic schemes are relatively new, and the ecosystem is still learning how they behave under real-world conditions. Some post-quantum signature designs that once looked promising have already been broken. If a blockchain rushes into the wrong solution, the consequences could be severe. On top of that, many crypto systems rely on aggregating multiple signatures into one to save space. For example, Ethereum's validator setup allows thousands of validators to combine approvals into a single compact signature. Many quantum-resistant signature schemes don't yet support this kind of aggregation efficiently. That means developers may need to accept larger messages for the same level of security or rethink how multi-sig wallets and validator voting mechanisms are designed. If all of this feels complicated, that's because it is. You're not missing anything. The key takeaway is the same one highlighted earlier. While there is some time pressure, developers need to be extremely careful about how quantum-resistant solutions are designed and deployed. That's easier said than done, but it's critical for the long-term health of blockchain systems. As a post-quantum future slowly comes into view, the A16Z report then lays out 7 recommendations for moving forward. The core message is to take the threat seriously, but not to plan as if a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is guaranteed to appear and break Bitcoin before 2030. Once again, the emphasis is on avoiding rushed decisions that could introduce even bigger problems later. First, the report recommends deploying hybrid encryption immediately, wherever long-term confidentiality matters, and the added cost is acceptable. Hybrid encryption simply means using today's standard encryption alongside a post-quantum alternative, ensuring protection even if one method turns out weaker than expected. This directly addresses the harvest now decrypt later risks discussed earlier, where attackers store encrypted data today and attempt to decrypt it in the future. Major internet infrastructure providers are already moving in this direction, which shows this is not just a theoretical concern. Second, the report recommends adopting hybrid hash-based signatures right now in areas where their large size is manageable, particularly for software and firmware updates. This isn't about blockchains themselves, but about ensuring that update mechanisms remain trustworthy in the future. If urgent post-quantum fixes ever need to be deployed, there must still be a secure and reliable way to deliver those updates to devices and systems. If the update system itself isn't ready for a post-quantum world, you can end up stuck in a vicious cycle where you can't safely distribute the very tools needed to become secure. Third, the report argues that blockchains shouldn't rush into adopting post-quantum signatures, but they absolutely should start planning now. The reason is that post-quantum signatures come with real trade-offs, whether that's larger data sizes, higher costs, more complex engineering, or simply more ways to get implementations wrong. The right approach is to prepare the migration path early. That means deciding how new signature schemes would be introduced, how wallets and exchanges would support them, and how users would gradually move their funds over time. This is especially critical for networks like Bitcoin, where coordination moves slowly and a careful strategy is needed to ensure dormant funds aren't put at risk. Fourth, privacy-focused chains need to treat this issue with greater urgency than others. If a protocol's core promise is transaction privacy, then stored encrypted data is exactly what attackers can harvest today and potentially decrypt later. The report's guidance here is straightforward. If performance allows, move sooner rather than later, and consider hybrid approaches or deeper design changes that avoid placing decryptable secrets on-chain in the first place. While the specifics differ depending on the privacy model and protocol design, the underlying risk is the same. Fifth, the report emphasizes that in the near term, implementation security should take priority over quantum mitigation. In plain terms, bugs are far more likely to destroy systems than quantum computers are. Post-quantum cryptography can be harder to implement safely, and complex crypto systems are fertile ground for edge cases and simple mistakes that attackers love to exploit. The advice here isn't flashy, but it's practical. Thorough audits, formal verification where appropriate, and layered defenses so that a single failure doesn't result in catastrophic loss. The sixth recommendation is simple but important. Invest in quantum computing research and talent. The report even frames this as a national security issue. If a major adversary achieves cryptographically relevant quantum capability first, the risk extends far beyond crypto assets. It threatens everything still built on today's public key cryptography. That makes sustained funding, research institutions, and talent development essential, even if the timeline remains long. Finally, the report urges people to stay level-headed when quantum milestones make headlines. There will be a steady stream of announcements about higher qubit counts, improved error rates, new chips, and fresh benchmarks. But a flood of milestones doesn't mean the finish line is near. It means there are still many steps left to take. For crypto holders, that translates to staying calm when quantum scare stories hit social media, even though some of those headlines will almost certainly trigger short-term volatility. The report closes by noting that its author, Justin Thaler, doesn't claim that a cryptographically relevant quantum computer appearing within 5 years is impossible, only that it's highly unlikely. From the perspective of crypto holders, the encouraging news is that developers are already working on solutions. Incentives across the ecosystem are aligned toward building a quantum-resistant future, but progress will come gradually, not all at once. In short, there's still time. That's the outlook on quantum computing and crypto, according to A16Z. Now, we want to hear from you. Is the concern overblown, or do you think a major breakthrough could send the entire industry into chaos? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more about recent network upgrades, you can also check out our video on Ethereum's latest Fusaka upgrade right here. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.